Hello, friends, and welcome back to Staying in My Lane podcast, where we talk about uncomfortable and awkward things. You can find this podcast on Apple, Amazon, Spotify. Just type in Staying in My Lane podcast. You can even check it out on YouTube. Just type in Staying in My Lane podcast and look for the logo that matches this podcast. So, on this podcast, we talk about a lot of things. And the past couple episodes, we've talked about trauma. How does that look when you're in a relationship with someone who has trauma? How can you be a support? Or what does it look like when you're the person in the relationship with trauma? How do we support our children when they have trauma, PTSD in children? And how do we forgive ourselves and other people when they hurt us or when we are hurting? And that can be a lot. That can be a lot to carry. This is the weight that we carry that no one sees. It doesn't show up on x-rays or MRIs. We don't wear a cast or a boot for it. It doesn't leave bruises or scratches that you can point to, but it's really heavy and it's constant. And for some people, it can become unbearable. So today I want to talk about how we unintentionally or intentionally judge others for that trauma and pain that they are experiencing. How it can affect our immune system. Can old emotional wounds turn into a chronic illness? The answer is yes. The science behind it is both sobering and empowering. So let's take a journey into the nervous system, the immune system, and how your biography can become your biology. So first, I want to give you a visual, and I want you to imagine this. You are walking through life with an invisible backpack, and every traumatic experience, every unresolved emotion, every unhealed situation, every moment that you've said, "I'm fine," when you weren't, all of that goes into this invisible backpack. At first, you can carry it. It's fine. You're strong, you're resilient. People may even admire you for your strength, but over time, it gets heavier. And it becomes really hard to remember what it feels like to walk without that invisible backpack. Trauma that is not released doesn't just disappear. It embeds itself into the body. We've talked about it. It hides in the nervous system. It rewires how we react to stress, how we connect with people, how we view the world. What we don't transform, we transmit, often silently, without knowing. That trauma that we carry is not just what happened to us, it's what happens inside of us as a result of what happened to us. Trauma shows up in our bodies. We've talked about it. Emotionally, trauma can cause anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, even digestive issues, and autoimmune disorders. Physically, trauma can show up as fatigue, sleep issues, chronic pain, or tension that we just can't stretch away. In relationships, trauma may lead to disconnection, fear of intimacy, or feeling like you're too much or not enough. But here's what's really happening under the surface. Your nervous system is designed to keep you safe. When you face a threat, real or perceived, by your sympathetic nervous system, that kicks in. That fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We've talked about it. But here's the twist. If a threat is overwhelming or inescapable, like a childhood abuse situation, neglect, or long-term stress, the body doesn't always reset itself. Instead, the nervous system can get stuck in survival mode. So you might feel anxious for no reason, numb, disconnected, or constantly exhausted. Dysregulation is not just in your head, it's in your brain circuits, your neurotransmitters, and even your hormones. I have deep dived into so much research on this, and once you really read about it and you watch videos and you educate yourself and you gain all this knowledge, you really learn that in essence the body keeps score. Here's where it gets a little fascinating but also a bit alarming. That chronic stress and unresolved trauma can cause inflammation, and that's the body's way of trying to protect you. Over time, though, this can cause constant immune activation, which can cause your brain and your body to kind of go haywire. So now we open the door into entering autoimmune disorders. Autoimmune conditions like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, even multiple sclerosis arise when the immune system mistakes your own body as the enemy and starts attacking healthy cells. Now you may be like, what's the connection to trauma? Well, studies show that people with a history of childhood trauma are significantly more likely to develop autoimmune diseases later in life. Chronic activation of that axis in our brains that controls the cortisol disrupts the immune regulation. And neuroinflammation, that inflammation in the brain, has been linked to trauma, depression, and immune dysfunction. Again, the body keeps score. The good news is that we can heal our nervous system. It can be rewired and changed to heal. When we work with trauma, not just talk about it, but move through it. Again, I think I've said that in a couple episodes, moving through our trauma, going through it, not around it, we can shift how the body reacts. Some healing tools that are beneficial are somatic therapy. I've talked about that. I like the holistic approaches more than I like the medications and prescriptions. Breath work, safe social connection, helping the body release stored trauma, yoga, EDMR, trauma-informed mindfulness, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, even things like anti-inflammatory nutrition, because what we eat also affects our inflammation levels. And that is something that I've personally struggled with. I have a lot of trauma that I've stored with inflammation. So being able to get that under control has been a challenge, especially with added stress. But healing is not about fixing yourself. It's about coming home to yourself safely. And sometimes I do want to say that medical treatment is necessary for autoimmune disorders and conditions, because that can become part of your journey as well. And sometimes that Western medicine, the prescriptions, the medications, that may be needed as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just like personally for myself to look at the holistic and naturopathic ways before I turn to medication. Now, I just want to skim over this really quickly. We've already have an episode on this specifically, but relationships and trauma. One of the hardest parts of holding on to our trauma is how it distorts our ability to trust, to feel safe, and to be emotionally open with other people. We build walls, not because we want to push people away, but because on some level, connection feels dangerous and risky. We might become hyper independent. I'll handle it myself. I want to control it. I want to do it myself. Or we may attach too tightly, afraid of what any distance may do because that feels like abandonment. Either way, trauma teaches us a language of fear. And so we start to speak it fluently. And without realizing, we kind of become attached to it. It becomes part of us. When love shows up, sometimes we can't receive that. Not because we don't want to, but because trauma says you don't deserve this. It won't last. Don't trust it. And it's not necessarily our fault, but it is our responsibility to notice when the past is writing the script of the present. And if you want to hear more about that specifically, go back and listen to the relationships and trauma episode, because I do discuss a lot of that directly in the episode. You know, the truth is that a lot of us grew up in environments where emotions were not safe, where crying was considered weak, where anger was punished, or where vulnerability was a liability. So we learned to suppress, to numb, to shrink. We learned and we were taught that silence keeps the peace, but silence also keeps us sick. The stories we don't tell, the grief that we don't process, that lives in our bodies. It lives in unspoken pain that doesn't go away, doesn't vanish. It becomes fatigue or irritability or anger or rage or burnout, the feeling that you're alive but not really living. Healing doesn't happen in the dark. It begins the moment that we allow the truth to breathe. And we've talked about this in the episodes of the trauma series. I don't really want to say series, but the couple episodes of the trauma where we talk about relationships and having children and forgiving and things like that. Letting go of that trauma that we have does not mean we're pretending it didn't happen. It means loving yourself and giving yourself permission to stop carrying the burden of it every day. It means reclaiming your nervous system, relearning what safety feels like, rebuilding that connection, reawakening that feeling of joy. And I think it's important to say that's not forgetting the trauma, that's feeling free and being free from the trauma. Healing can be excruciating. We've talked about that. I'm not going to keep going on about that. But again, this doesn't mean that we are broken. Wounds can heal with time, with care, with safe people, with safe environments, and with practices that remind your body that you are not in danger anymore. Again, you can refer back to therapy, movement, breathwork, journaling, boundaries, rest. All of that matters. All of that counts. All of that can help heal you and your body. Now, as we wrap up this conversation and move on to the next part of this episode, I want you to take the time to think about when you've judged either yourself or someone else for their trauma. I want to tackle a tough but important question. Why do we judge people with trauma? whether it's ourselves or other people, but probably mostly other people. Let's start with a really hard truth that's really hard to admit. We all judge people. I've done it, whether it's on purpose or not. When it comes to people who've been through trauma, whether it's childhood abuse, war, addiction, or deep emotional loss, those judgments can come really quick and they can be really sharp. She's so dramatic. He's just looking for attention. Why can't they just get over it? We hear these things. Some of us say these things, and many of us think them without even saying them out loud. But why? Why do we judge people who are hurting? So let's unpack that. The discomfort of pain. One reason is discomfort. Other people's trauma makes us deeply uncomfortable. It reminds us of pain, our own or someone else's. It reminds us that life can spiral, that control is an illusion, that wounds don't always heal cleanly. When someone shows visible signs of trauma, anxiety, distrust, hypervigilance, emotional reactivity, we don't often see the context behind that. We just see the behavior. And behavior without context, it's easy to label. It's easier to judge than to empathize. Think about it for a second. When I talked in the episode about children and trauma, it's really easy to judge a child who is screaming on the grocery store floor, or it's really easy to judge the mom who is smoking cigarettes on her weekend when she's partying without her kids. But you know what? It's none of our business. Another reason that we judge is the myth of control. We like to believe that we are in control of our lives. So when someone's trauma leads them to struggle with relationships, substance use, mental health, judging them becomes a way of protecting ourselves. I don't know if anybody's ever looked at it that way, but it's true. It creates this mental distance. That could never be me. I would never do that. They must have made really bad choices. Oh my gosh, I would never act like that. I would never go that low. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Trauma does not discriminate. None of us are immune from having trauma. None of us are immune from experiencing difficulties. No matter if we came from a rich family and we didn't have to ask for anything, no matter if we didn't have a horrible childhood, no matter if we haven't been divorced or haven't been assaulted or abused, trauma does not discriminate. And if we were all in the same shoes, same childhood, same environment, same experiences, we might not be so different. And honestly, the social narrative, we are also shaped by a culture that glorifies resilience, or at least a very specific version of that. We celebrate survivors as long as they're silent, strong, and inspirational. But if they're messy, angry, raging, still healing, we get impatient, we become uncomfortable, even annoyed or frustrated, and we judge. There seems to be this unspoken rule or expectation that if you've been through something, that's okay, but you better be turning that pain into productivity. You better be healing on our timeline right now. So when someone doesn't fit that script or that narrative, we judge them, not because they're weak, but because they remind us that healing is not a straight line. Healing is not going to be a one-stop shop. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And sometimes judgment is just projection and unhealed wounds. Someone else's trauma behavior might mirror something that's unresolved in us, and that causes irritation or frustration or judgment or anger. Maybe we grew up with a parent who had emotional wounds, and now we feel triggered by people who express similar behaviors. Maybe we've buried our own pain so deep that when someone else shows us theirs, it feels like an emotional threat. So we judge, not because of them, but because of us. That vulnerability that they show threatens the version of ourselves that we built to survive on. But judgment doesn't help people heal. It doesn't make trauma go away. It just adds shame to the pain, and shame is one of the greatest barriers to growth. When we judge trauma, we silence people. When we push them to hide, we make it harder for them to ask for help. And I just want to say that's something I find so strange. We glorify when people ask for help, but then we shame them and turn around and are not kind to the people who need the help. It can be harder for us to be the kind of people who can give that help back, especially when we are struggling with our own trauma. But we also turn around and on the flip side, we judge what we are not comfortable with. And so it's kind of that seesaw, if you will, of wanting to help but not knowing how, or wanting to hear it but not wanting to actually hear it. We make it really hard for people to ask for help. We make it hard for people to want to be vulnerable in this world that we live in. So when we think about the alternative, it's not about never judging. We're human, we're going to judge, but we can notice our judgments and we can pause and reflect on that and ask, what might this person have gone through that I can't see? What pain might be underneath that behavior? How would I want someone to treat me if I were in their shoes? Empathy doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior, but it does mean recognizing that trauma has roots, and those roots run really deep. It can be really difficult to heal from trauma. Maybe it's been a week, a month, a year, and people start saying, you're still upset about that. Shouldn't you be moving on by now? Or worse, you start saying it to yourself. And we just talked about that. Society pressures us to heal on a timeline that is not ours. It's everywhere, and it's baked into our culture in such a way where productivity, obsessed, image, curated culture forces us to heal or pressures us to heal in a way that looks good. We are told explicitly that grief and trauma are disruptions to life that should be managed quickly and quietly, because if you're still hurting, you're seen as weak, broken, or less functional than others. And what happens when we feel like we have to heal quickly? We start performing. We start putting on a front. We pretend that we're okay when we're not, and we suppress those emotions. We gaslight ourselves. And often we delay true healing because we never actually faced the depth of what happened. We also isolate because if healing takes us longer than expected, we start to believe that something is wrong with us. And the truth is, friends, it's not. There is nothing wrong with taking time to heal on our terms, not society's. Not our families, not our husband, our wife, not our friends, nobody. Pain takes the time it takes. Real healing is slow, it's spiral shaped, it's not linear. It looks like crying unexpectedly. And I've given examples in the relationships and children episodes of trauma. Healing and grieving might mean going to therapy. It might mean resting. It might mean saying no to a lot. And it definitely means refusing to measure your pain by someone else's comfort, including society's standards for healing and just suppressing our emotions. So how do we turn our pain and wounds into power when society is busy picking us apart? We live in a world that loves a strong person only after they've cleaned themselves up. We celebrate that resilience once it's glossy. We admire people who've been through hell as long as they're smiling at the end of their post. But I just want to point out a different perspective. The pain that we go through has power, not because it's noble or poetic, but because it changes us and forces us to grow. It forces us to confront things that we've avoided. It strips away the noise. It teaches us what's real, who's real, what matters, and what we are capable of surviving. Because if we really think about it, humans are so strong. We lose children, we lose our parents, we go through grief, we lose our partners, we have our heart broken repeatedly over and over and over again. And it teaches us what to do with that pain. The pain doesn't give you strength on its own, but what you do with it, that's where that transformation really begins. And I have seen so many of my friends go through really hard losses, and the transformations and the way that they go through the grieving process and the way that they have came out stronger and healthier and still grieving, yes, but strong. They are so incredibly strong. I admire that so deeply. Once we start setting boundaries that we were too scared to set before, we stop tolerating things that used to keep us small, start speaking, moving, and loving with more depth because you earned that depth. That is strength, not the curated kind, not the filtered kind on social media, not the applause-worthy kind, the kind that lives in your bones and in your soul. But one thing, after talking to my friends who've been through a lot of really hard things and having gone through really hard things myself, even when you do find your strength, society is still going to judge you. You'll be told, you're too much, you're too cold, you've changed. And you know what? They're right. We have changed. Because pain made us see things differently. It woke us up. And no, we don't owe anyone the version of ourselves that we tolerated the mistreatment or pretended to be fine with, the world that we live in is going to judge our pain. It's going to judge our personality. It's going to judge the power that we've taken back after going through traumatic events, after grieving, and after healing. But do it anyway. Our strength as humans, we don't need permission to exist. We don't need permission to heal. Turning pain into strength is not about becoming someone else. It's about coming back to yourself with more honesty, more fire, and more clarity. You don't need to be inspirational to justify your healing. You don't have to write a book about it, start a movement, make a movie, make a podcast even, or even tell anyone what you went through. Sometimes the most powerful things are quiet survival, staying, trying again, loving with scarred hands. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like saying no. Sometimes it looks like rest. Like I said, sometimes it looks like just starting over again and again and again. Some chapters in our lives don't end quietly. They leave chaos and echoes, scars, loose ends, and yet we still have the power to say, this chapter is over, I'm moving on to the next. This is where something new begins. And not every chapter closes the way that we want to. For example, take mine with my divorce and having my ex-husband lose his rights to my children. Sometimes the apology that you want or the justice that you want is never served. It never comes. Sometimes the people who hurt us move on without a second thought, like my family members. And we are left holding the weight and the pain and the questions. Trauma has a way of keeping us stuck in that between space where one part of us is still trying to survive the past, while another part is quietly dreaming of something more. Closing a chapter doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means deciding that it doesn't get to define you anymore. You might still carry the lessons, the pain. You might still feel that pain from time to time when holidays come around, or certain times of the day or certain times of the year remind you of something or someone. But you get to choose what comes next. And that choice, that's where that power really lives in. But maybe when we stop replaying the past every single day, when we no longer need revenge, just distance, when we start imagining a future that isn't built in survival, when we start choosing peace even when chaos feels more familiar. We may not feel ready, but readiness doesn't always feel like certainty. Sometimes it's just exhaustion from carrying what no longer fits our life. And that can be a hard thing. I feel like I thrived on chaos for a really long time, and it's taken me a really long time to feel comfortable in silence. It's taken me a long time to not have to feel like I live in survival mode or that fight or flight mode, which I'm still honestly trying to get out of and I'm trying to heal from. But it's very important and critical in order to heal and accept that closing a chapter, it doesn't mean that you're just ignoring it or putting it away or saying it never happened or it's not important. And closing a chapter doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be quiet, personal, and intentional. It means that you are healing and letting go of what happened, and you are turning that pain into healing. You might write a letter that you'll never send, block the number, get rid of an item that you've been holding on to just in case, tell your therapist the story one last time and then choose to stop retelling it. Or if you're like me, you will send some text messages and just get it all out one last time and then choose to close the chapter and go no contact. But everyone needs permission to let go without having all the answers. And for me, that is the most painful and hardest thing that I've ever had to do. I am somebody who questions everything. I want to know the answers. I want to know why. I want to know the root cause of everything. And so accepting that I'm not going to have all the answers has been extremely difficult for me to come to terms with. It's hard to accept that I don't need to tie it up with a bow and be able to present it to myself and tell myself that this chapter is closed. I just need to stop the bleeding from the same wound over and over again, and I just need to be able to put a Band-Aid on it and have it heal. One of the hardest lessons that I've ever had to learn and come to terms with is that starting over or moving on doesn't mean pretending that none of it happened. It means reclaiming my voice and rewriting my narrative. It means creating a life where I'm not reacting to pain, but I'm actively choosing peace and joy on my terms. And if I said that was easy, I would be 100% lying to you because I'm still working on that. But one thing I've noticed is that I'm starting to notice people who make me feel safe. I'm starting to set those boundaries that used to make me feel scared. I'm taking risks not because I'm fearless, but because I'm done letting fear decide for me. And for me, I have been in that fight or flight for so long that I have been scared to have change. For me, when I see change, I want to flight. I want to leave. I want to run away. I do not want to be around change. Change freaks me out. It gives me anxiety, and I start getting really defensive. It's not about becoming someone new, though. It's about becoming more than you've ever been. And learning that and taking the time to really understand that I'm not becoming a different person or becoming less of a person or whatever. It's about becoming a better and stronger version of who I was before. That pain that I felt has left me feeling stuck and shattered numerous times over and over. But what if our pain is also the beginning of something new? Not the end of our story, but that transformation, that new chapter. As we've talked about, pain shows up in many forms: emotional, physical, spiritual. And although trying to suppress that is society's way of forcing us to heal, pain in the body is the mind's way of calling attention to something deeper. So I have a question for you. What if our wounds, what if our most painful experiences are invitations? Invitations to heal, to grow, to learn about ourselves, to stop running from the pain and start listening to it instead. What if we, instead of running from our pain or looking at it as a negative, what if we twisted it into a positive, as an invitation to grow, to heal, to learn and get to know ourselves on a deeper level? Turning that pain into healing is not a quick fix. It's a process. It's one that, again, is not on any timeline. It's deeply personal to who we are as individuals. What I may do for myself and what works for me may not be the same as what works for you. And it may not be the same as what you want to do for yourself. But there are patterns and tools and truths that many of us can draw from. Let's walk through a few of them quickly. Acknowledgement. You can't heal what you don't name. So sit with it, journal, say it out loud. There's power in simply saying that this hurts. What I went through caused me pain. Feel it. We often try to numb that pain with distractions, substances, denial, but the real healing asks us to feel it. Rage, break down if you need to, cry. Don't hurt anybody. That's not what I'm saying. Don't hurt anybody or yourself. Emotion is not a weakness, it's release. Seek that support. We've talked about that numerous times. I'm not going to get into that. Forgiveness. Sometimes it's about forgiving others. Sometimes it's about forgiving yourself. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, like I've said in the forgiveness episode. It's about freeing yourself from carrying that pain. Meaning making. Okay, this one is really huge. Ask yourself, what did this teach me? How has this shaped me? What can I now offer the world because of this? Pain can become purpose. Whether it's through writing a letter, creating art, walking in nature, starting a new chapter, starting a podcast like I did, we need rituals to let go and move forward. My pain turned into purpose by sharing it with other people who can relate and know that they are not walking alone. So if you are in the middle of pain right now, this is your reminder that it won't always feel like this. The very fact that you're listening today, showing up, seeking information, seeking that support, means that you're already on this path. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying your pain with compassion, not shame. It means letting it shape you, not define you. And maybe one day your story becomes someone else's survival guide. Thank you so much for being here today. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you shared this with someone else who needs to hear it. Healing is not going to be easy. What matters is that you keep going and don't give up. Not in a perfect way, but just honestly, vulnerably, with grace, with courage, with the reminder that pain is not a flaw. It's a sign that you've lived, that you're loved, and that you're human. And healing is your birthright. So take a deep breath and remind yourself that you've survived 100% of your hardest days so far. You're still here, and that means that it's time to grow, time to love, time to heal. One small step at a time. We are not broken. You are not broken. I am not broken. We are becoming who we were meant to be. As we close today, I want to leave you with this. We all carry pain. The person sitting next to you, the person in the car driving beside you, the person passing you in the grocery store. Some of it is loud, some of it's visible, some of it's quiet and hidden. And too often we pile judgment on top of that pain. But healing, again, it's not easy. It's not something that we schedule or control. It's messy, it loops back and forth, it surprises us, and it's deeply personal. So if you are hurting or in a slow, complicated process of healing, I want you to know that you're not behind and you don't have to rush. Release the need to compare your healing to anyone else's. Release the shame around how long it's taking. Your journey and your timeline, it's yours, no one else's. You're allowed to be a work in progress and a masterpiece at the same time. So wherever you are today, in the thick of it, just beginning or quietly rebuilding, I see you. Keep going. We will walk this path together, and I will be here every step of the way to give you advice, to give you support, to help you have a voice that you can relate to. But for now, I'm going to go. I'm going to make some dinner, and I will see you later.